Bendy and Boris in the Inky Mystery by this animated phantom and Marco Way. Chapter 2. Who gives a hoot? Bendy was already regretting this. It was extremely late, they had work tomorrow, and Boris and the bird were still chatting.
"Hey, Boris, I think it's time for bed,"
he said, cutting through some comment of Wilson's. But... Boris began. Bendy shot him a warning look. Boris snapped his muzzle shut and got ready for bed without argument. Wilson watched silently, with his glassy eyes. When Boris shut his bedroom door, Bendy turned to the owl.
"You can sleep on the couch. We have work in the morning, so I'm turning in too,"
he said, stretching.
"I thought you had questions for me,"
Wilson said. Bendy glared at him in irritation. All he wanted was to go to bed and forget about this weirdo and the bad feeling twisting his stomach. He was exhausted and stressed. All he wanted was a little R&R after a long day. Was that too much to ask? The owl raised a feathery brow. Bendy cursed and took a kitchen chair to the living room to sit across from the owl.
"Fine. What the cuss was all that when I bumped into you?"
Bendy asked.
I must apologize for that. I have been traveling for quite some time now. My focus was a bit scattered," he explained. "What did you mean when you said another one?"
Bendy used air quotations mockingly. Wilson shifted uncomfortably. Bendy narrowed his eyes and scowled.
"Got a problem with someone like me?"
It wouldn't be the first time for Bendy. He had gotten quite a bit of the cold shoulder due to what he was. He didn't care. He had Boris. Boris loved him and supported him and never judged him. He was happy with his little bro.
No,
the owl denied.
"Nothing like that. I simply don't know where to begin." "Oh, then how about the part where it was dangerous to talk on the streets?"
Bendy asked. He slouched in his chair and crossed his arms over his narrow chest.
"Yes, I guess that'll work,"
Wilson murmured. He cleared his throat.
"Sadly, I seem to be running for my life."
Bendy's eyes widened.
"I know several things that certain individuals would rather I remain quiet about."
The bird turned his head. Bendy thought it might be a nervous tic.
"I was in Crestville, talking to a journalist when the fire started. I used the bus system to escape. I don't know what happened to my journalist friend. I fear the worst."
Bendy clenched his jaw. Was he serious? Had Bendy put his brother in danger by allowing this guy to come here?
"That was really arson? And now you're here in my apartment?"
Bendy spat out. The owl looked startled by his reaction. His glassy eyes widened.
"Yes, but you must understand. It's important that the population be warned. There's—" "Stop,"
Bendy commanded with a raised hand, like he could physically stop the words.
"I don't want to know anything that could get me killed. I won't let my brother or myself get involved in something so dangerous. When morning comes, I want you out of my house."
The bird seemed extremely uneasy and sad. He looked heartbroken. Bendy wasn't moved. This guy was endangering Boris. He had no pity.
"I'm sorry. Regrettably, you're already involved,"
the owl said mournfully. Bendy startled. Were the people after him that close? Was Bendy already too late to get out? No, he didn't know anything. They wouldn't have a reason to go after him or Boris.
"You see, when I said another one, I meant you were already involved. You will be one of the innocent victims of their insidious designs."
Fear spiked in Bendy. The stupid bird brain was really pushing his luck. Bendy was about to smack the cryptic out of him.
"What are you?" "It's a disease,"
the owl explained seriously.
"They are going to allow a plague to sweep this world with pain and death. There are only a few that have gotten sick so far. I am not even sure if doctors have connected the dots yet. I call it ink illness. They want it to spread."
Bendy blinked. What?
"Why would people want a plague? That's crazy,"
he said. Wilson nodded.
"It is. I'm not sure why either. I was a part of a team that was researching the creators and ancient artifacts when I had my first encounter with them. It started with bribes and warnings. They didn't want us digging up the past. My team and I ignored them, and things escalated to threats and violence. Eventually I had to flee, but not before uncovering some information on this plague."
Wilson said, crossing his wings, and leaned back into the old couch.
"I couldn't get everything, and I understood even less, but I have deduced from legend that this disease is supposedly connected to the creators somehow. The disease breaks apart everything to a basic matter, a black sticky substance. It's very disturbing. This cult, or whoever they are, sees it as a type of cleansing, I think." Wait.
Bendy waved his hands and shook his head.
"This doesn't have anything to do with me. All that crazy stuff you said earlier. Something about my talents." "You see, I know your talent is with darkness, shadow, yes, even inky matter. I can't be completely sure without experimentation, but it could be the very substance that I was researching with the artifacts. There were writings of a machine. I believe if someone like you could get to this machine, you would be able to concoct some kind of cure before the plague can even begin its devastation,"
the owl explained. Bendy just gaped at him. He shook his head back and forth in denial. This bird brain was nuts.
"I have reason to believe that such a machine exists. I also have to think there must be a way to stop this. Else why try to get rid of me? I must be seen as a threat. Thus there is a weakness to expose."
The owl mused.
I don't get it. This is too much,"
Bendy uttered. Wilson looked at him pitying.
"I know, son, I know. I have been running for a year now, and I am still overwhelmed. But after seeing the illness's effects firsthand, I know I must do something." "You've seen it?"
Bendy asked in horror. Wilson nodded.
"Only 2 cases. One was a sickly old fellow, and the other was young and healthy. The fellow passed within a day of showing symptoms. The other fought it for months before we met. The
owl took a shaky breath.
"It was a devastating situation."
"What are the symptoms?" Bendy asked. Wilson stared at the floor for a long moment. He didn't look up at Bendy.
"It starts with chest pains, then a mild cough. Next is build-up in the lungs and expulsion of this dark substance. There is a reason I compare it to ink, you see. It happens in episodes. The person can seem fine for the day, and then suddenly collapse in an attack. They start to drip with the ink during the attacks like their bodies are rejecting their very forms. The pain increases in the attacks to seemingly unbearable levels. After that, they collapse, form completely gone. They just..."
A pained look crossed his face.
"Melt. They become a puddle of ink. That's all that's left."
He looked haunted. Bendy shivered. A heavy silence fell between them. A question came to Bendy that he had to ask.
"Is it contagious?"
His voice seemed too loud. Wilson started slightly from memories.
Ooh, oh no! No, it's not. I'm not sure how one contracts illness. One of my last contacts, an old friend in Toontown. He might know by now. He worked in the Yen University. I asked him to consider the cases and any new ones that pop up. I have been concerned leading my pursuers to him, so I haven't contacted him since then.
Bendy breathed a sigh of relief. Okay, he and Boris wouldn't get sick because they met this guy. At least that was something.
He might be the best chance you have,
Wilson said, staring at Bendy in that mournful way.
Huh?
Bendy's confusion was written all over his face. Wilson blinked and swiveled his head side to side before stopping.
Ah, well, I see that I will have to be forthright.
He sounded nervous. Wilson took a deep breath as his shoulders fell like the weight of the world was on them. If he was right, and Bendy doubted that, it really could be.
There is no easy way to say this. Bendy, you have illness.
Silence fell for a moment. Bendy suddenly burst into laughter. Wilson blinked in surprise, but his expression quickly changed to serious dread.
You've got to be kidding me.
Bendy chuckled.
I'm perfectly healthy. Heck, the last time I had a cold was forever ago. I understand you don't want to believe me. You got that right.
Bendy's laughing suddenly dropped to seriousness.
I don't believe you, bird brain. There is no way I'm buying this. Especially if you think I've got anything more than a good case of tired, and I know how to cure that. Sleep, and that's where I'm headed. Look, boy, you may not be showing any symptoms now, but I at least want to inform you so you're prepared.
The owl said determinedly, like a concerned parent.
Don't need it,
Bendy replied. He stood up and picked up the chair to put back in the kitchen.
You can be stubborn, but at least listen to this above all else, please,
Wilson begged. Bendy didn't respond. He just set the chair down. Wilson continued anyway.
You'll have to focus. Stay strong and fight it. Focus on the things that keep you going in this world and don't give up.
Wilson said.
Find the things that ground you and hang on to them like no other. I believe you can go years before it gets to you. But my greatest hope is that you find a cure before it comes to that.
Bendy passed back by the living room and gave Wilson a blank look. Wilson's huge eyes lit with a determined fire.
I still want you gone in the morning,
Bendy stated coldly.
I am not wrong, young man. I've seen enough to know. My talent has me assured. I'm sorry I can do no more for you,
Wilson said as Bendy passed by. Bendy shut his door without looking back. He locked his door and went to bed. He kicked off his shoes and groaned as he lay down.
That bird brain was absolutely nuts.
Bendy gazed up at the sliver of moon that glinted outside his window. The weirdo would be gone in the morning, and Bendy and Boris would go back to their normal lives. No colds, no owls, no illness, no ink, just car grease and dance nights. Bendy fell asleep with the thoughts of music and dancing, and dripping darkness and cries of pain. He didn't sleep well. Boris awoke to the rising sun. He stretched and yawned. He rolled out of bed and quickly jumped in the shower. In 20 minutes flat, he was dressed and ready for the day. He quietly opened the door and peeked out. Wilson slept on the couch, whistling a soft hoot-like snore occasionally. Boris smiled and walked on his silent paws to the kitchen to start breakfast. It wasn't long before the smell of pancakes and eggs aroused Wilson.
Good morning, Boris,
Wilson said from the living room. He gazed over the back of the couch at the young wolf with his large eyes.
"Good morning, Mr. Wilson. How are you feeling?"
Boris smiled at his guests.
"I'm doing well, all things considered,"
Wilson answered.
"Breakfast will be done in a minute."
"Oh, thank you. But I really should be going."
Wilson waved a wink in denial.
"Nope, not before you've eaten at least. I know how it feels to be on an empty stomach for too long. No one should have to deal with that."
Boris pulled a face. Wilson had a sad look enter his eyes.
"Do you now? I'm sorry you've had to face that, and at such a young age."
Wilson became wary.
"No reason to be, sir. We're doing great now. Bendy and I have got off the streets a while ago. We live the high life now, if I think about it like that."
Boris smiled.
"Is that so?"
Wilson grew wary.
"It's probably rude for me to ask, but how did you and your brother end up on the streets in the first place? What about your parents?"
Boris set the table and grew thoughtful. He shrugged.
"As far as I remember, I never had any parents. I'm 14 now, I think, and Bendy is about 18. I don't really know how I got on the streets. Feels like I was always out there. But Bendy saved me and watched out for me. Without him, I probably wouldn't have made it to today."
"Saved you?"
Wilson asked. He made his way to the table and sat down. He was amazed at how young they still were to have faced such difficulty. They would have still been children. They practically were still kids. What about an orphanage, or even the police? Hadn't there been any adult that tried to help them? He brimmed with questions, but held back. Boris separated the food and sat across from him.
"Yeah, we,
Boris wrinkled his snout and looked amused.
aren't related by blood. It's pretty obvious looking at us. But Bendy's my brother anyway. He found me starving in an alley. He fed me, protected me, and made me laugh. It was a pretty dark day for me, the day we met. I had,
The wolf shifted uncomfortably with the memory. He looked down at the pancakes and eggs he made.
I had kinda just given up on trying anymore. He found me. Bendy gave me hope to live again. I owe him everything. He's my family."
Wilson smiled softly.
"You both love each other dearly. It's nice to meet such a compassionate pair of brothers."
Boris blushed, realizing how much he'd said.
"He does get annoying sometimes. His flirting is awful, and his jokes."
Boris muttered in dismay, like a horrible tragedy took place. Wilson simply laughed.
"Oh, I better wake him up. Bendy's never a morning person."
Boris got up and headed to Bendy's door. He was surprised to find it locked. Bendy awoke to knocking on his door.
"Bendy, you gotta get up. We're going to be late, and I don't want to see Pete mad again."
Boris called through the thin door. Bendy groaned as he slowly got out of bed. His restless sleep hadn't done him any good. The little demon stretched and shuffled out of his room and headed straight to the coffee machine.
"You're not ready at all."
Boris whined when he spotted Bendy. Bendy froze at the sight before him. Boris and Wilson sat at the little kitchen table, eating eggs and pancakes. Bendy grit his teeth.
"I thought I said I wanted you gone in the morning."
Bendy stated coldly, as he continued to his goal of coffee. Wilson wilted under his gaze. Boris glared at Bendy indignantly.
"We can't let him go on an empty stomach, brother. What's with you?"
"I don't like having him here. He's dangerous to have around,"
Bendy said, pouring some cream and a little sugar in his mug before taking a gulp.
"You aren't."
"That's okay,"
Wilson spoke up.
"Your brother is right. I shouldn't have come here. I have put the two of you in danger by just being here, but I felt like I should warn you.
Wilson spoke to Boris, but the message was clearly for Bendy. Bendy bristled at that last comment.
Warn us?
Boris asked, concerned.
Hey, we're going to be late. Get your stuff together,
Bendy said.
But you aren't even dressed,
Boris protested.
Yet I will still be ready before you,
Bendy said. Boris pouted and got up. Bendy made sure Boris left before approaching Wilson.
You don't say any of your crazy ideas to Boris, got it? Leave my brother alone.
Bendy warned darkly.
You think you're protecting him, but I think he should be prepared for what will happen,
Wilson said.
Nothing will happen,
Bendy growled.
Bendy.
Wilson used the tone that adults had for troublesome children. It only ticked Bendy off all the more.
You won't be able to ignore this. I'm sorry, but this is the truth. Inkiness is... I am not sick,
Bendy shouted.
What?
Boris squeaked in surprise. Bendy whipped around. Boris stood in the kitchen entrance, his jaw hanging open, and eyes the size of dinner plates.
You're sick?
No, I'm fine,
Bendy said.
This bird brain is just spewing nonsense.
Bendy!
Boris furrowed his brows. His ears folded against his skull.
Why are you hiding stuff from me?
What? No, I'm not hiding anything. It's just this wacko's crazy ideas. It's not true. I'm perfectly fine,
Bendy argued.
Then why is he dangerous? If it's all nonsense, why are you trying to push Wilson out so quickly?
Boris took a step forward.
He is going to drag us into his trouble.
Bendy took a step forward.
Then he needs help.
Boris took another step.
We don't know what the heck he's about,
Bendy shot back.
Wilson has been nothing but kind. What are you scared of?
Boris pressed. The two were nearly nose to nose.
Either he's in trouble or he's lying,
Boris said.
Which is it?
He...
Bendy cringed, making a choking sound. Wilson is suddenly by his side with a look of concern.
Are you okay? Get away from me!
Bendy shouted. Wilson and Boris flinched back. Bendy marched out of the room and slammed his bedroom door.
Bendy!
Boris whispered in concern. He looked toward where Bendy disappeared to.
I am truly sorry. I didn't mean to bring conflict between the two of you, but like I said, your brother is right. My presence does put you in danger. It's best if I leave,
Wilson said.
Please, don't go. My brother is way out of line. He normally doesn't act like that. I'm sorry,
Boris said, turning to Wilson. Wilson shook his feathered head.
It's all right. I understand that he's only protecting you.
The owl smiled. Wilson headed toward the door.
Wait, before you leave. What's this about Bendy being sick? It's been a long time since he has reacted like that,
Boris asked quietly. Wilson looked back. Boris's shoulders were hunched, his tail tucked under him and his ears still lying flat. His eyes were large and glassy with fear. He had a hand covering his muzzle. Wilson sighed.
He didn't want me to say.
Tell me anyway,
Boris said. Wilson shut his eyes for a long second. He released a breath and seemed to sag in defeat.
I believe your brother may have something called inkillness. It's deadly. I recommend you take him to an old friend of mine in Toontown. His name is Dr. Ryan Otwell. He used to work at the Yen University, but I don't know where he is now. If there is anyone that could help him, it's Otwell.
Boris's eyes got even bigger.
deadly, but he seems fine.
The wolf shook his head and seemed to swallow his panic with a spurt of hope.
He can get better if it is this ink thing, right? There's a cure or treatment, right?
Wilson hesitated. Boris began shaking. He knew what that meant, but he didn't want to believe it. He couldn't.
I want to believe that you too will find a way,
he finally said. Boris clenched his teeth and wrapped his arms around himself. He couldn't imagine a world without Bendy in it. He was fine, but there wasn't any reason for Wilson to be lying to him. Boris could see the truth of it in the bird's sad, experienced eyes.
What do I do?
He whispered. Tears threatened at the thought of being alone in this world.
Be strong for him. Be understanding, and just be there for him. Like when he gave you a will to live and protected you. Make him smile. Be happy with him. Be his pillar of hope,
Wilson said. Boris' ears perked at that. He wiped the tears on his forearm. A fire of determination entered his dark eyes, and he gave Wilson a nod. Wilson smiled.
If there is anyone who can beat this, it'll be you and Bendy. I feel it in my feathers.
Boris smiled. That's right. It had always been him and Bendy. Nothing would change that. Nothing at all.
Goodbye, Boris. I wish the both of you the greatest of luck. Thank you for your kindness. Thank your brother for me too,
Wilson said and opened the door.
Okay, good luck, Mr. Wilson,
Boris said. Wilson nodded and shut the door. He didn't expect he'd ever get to see those two again. Still, the fire in those youths only strengthened his resolve to save this world. He had formed a new idea. Now he simply needed to act upon it. The walk to work was filled with a tense silence that made Boris really uncomfortable. Bendy refused to talk when he came out of his room, dressed and ready to leave. He didn't comment on the disappearance of Wilson. He didn't look at Boris. He just stared ahead with a blank, if not somewhat frustrated look in his eyes. Boris attempted multiple times to get him to say something. He didn't mention the illness, since that's what set him off in the first place. It wasn't until they were right in front of the garage that Boris stopped.
I'm sorry, Bendy. I know you're just worried,
Boris said. Bendy paused and finally turned to him.
Whatever,
he muttered.
Doesn't matter.
Boris's spirits fell even further. Bendy wouldn't forgive him until he got out of his mood. Boris hated when Bendy was mad at him. Sure, they argued like any siblings do, but times like this were rare. Boris sighed. Bendy must have heard it. Bendy paused before heading inside and cleared his throat.
Look,
There you are.
Pete slammed the door open.
An hour late.
His eyes were ablaze with anger, his voice a roaring growl. The brothers cringed back.
We're sorry. We had to.
Boris tried.
I don't want to hear it,
Pete snarled.
And to make things worse, one of you idiots screwed up. I had to cover the damage from my own pocket.
What?
Bendy snapped, surprised.
I want you in my office, now.
Pete snapped, jamming a finger into Bendy's face. Bendy grit his teeth. Boris looked to Bendy, alarmed. Pete turned and marched inside.
Bendy?
Boris asked in a small voice.
Go clock in, Boris. I'll be fine.
Bendy glanced at Boris with a reassuring look.
And I'm sorry for this morning, too.
Boris gave him a small smile before doing what Bendy told him to. Bendy looked down the greasy hallway to Pete's door. Little flyers littered the bulletin board with gaudy advertisements. The smell of old fast food, grease, and cigar smoke polluted the warm air. Bendy pursed his lips into a hard line before entering the office. Pete was pacing. His eyes narrowed at Bendy.
"Do you think you're being funny, huh?"
Pete demanded.
"Sit,"
he ordered.
"No, boss."
Bendy shut the door and sat in the little rickety chair across from Pete's huge glossy desk.
"I'm guessing you're the one that screwed up the car yesterday,"
Pete said, winking one eye closed to glare at Bendy. He landed in his cushy leather chair with a thump. Bendy swore the floor shook. He opened a drawer and fiddled around in it.
"I didn't make any mistake. I tightened every bolt and nut on it. It was perfect when we left,"
Bendy argued.
"Tell that to the customers,"
Pete hissed.
"Take a look at the accident."
Pete threw a binder across the desk. Bendy's heart dropped. He opened the file to see picture of the car he had been working under the other day, smashed into a tree.
"What happened? Is everyone okay?"
Fear coursed through his veins. He knew they had fixed it up fine. Everything had been in working order. But if someone was hurt, he didn't know what he would do.
"They're fine, and they blame us. The cops are still looking into it."
Pete sneered.
"Useless pigs."
Bendy released a breath of relief. Thank heavens.
"Due to these recent events, your character is in question."
Pete suddenly sounded very professional.
"What?"
Bendy said, still looking at the pictures and reports in the file.
"I'm not sure your presence here is good for the business."
Pete continued, pulling out another folder. Bendy was still mentally stalled at the sudden change in Pete's attitude. Pete also grabbed a cigar and stuck it unlit into his mouth. Bendy put the report down and narrowed his eyes.
"Pete, are you saying what I think you're saying?"
Bendy asked flatly.
"I believe it is in both of our best interests if I let you go."
Pete smirked.
"That's a load of hogwash,"
Bendy barked.
"I've been working here for years. I've worked holidays and weekends. I've done so with lower pay than what most will think is legal. I'm one of the best damn mechanics you've ever seen. One incident and you're throwing me under the bus?" "Let's see."
Pete opened the file, retaining his professional facade, and started reading.
"Multiple harassment incidents with your boss, 2 fights, 4 incidents of broken machinery, multiple offenses of being late, and a lack of customer-friendly service."
Pete listed in a mocking and pleased voice. He sounded like a kid that won a prize and was bragging about it.
"Your machinery is as old and faulty as the dinosaurs, and any other person would refuse to work at this place due to the safety violations. I was late due to the flu, and it's only been a small number of times. Those customers harassed me, and I handled it fantastically until the cops came to take care of it. One of them was demanding their money back because of something you did, and I protected you. Oh, and let's not forget, you're a selfish, greedy price."
Bendy stated.
"You aren't willing to take responsibility for your actions?"
Pete asked. Did he just say that?
"Don't take things out of context."
Bendy banged his fist on the desk. Pete sighed.
"And now you're acting out in violence."
This jerk. He had been dealing with this jerk for years, all for the sake of keeping food on the table. Now all of a sudden this was happening?
"I am not!"
Bendy shouted.
"You can't fire me on these grounds."
Pete gave him a bored look for a long moment.
"Well, if it's not you, then I guess there is another person that could be responsible."
All the anger dropped to icy dread.
He is rather clumsy after all. Not the brightest bulb. This could all be his fault. If you really want to fight this, then I guess I can investigate him instead.
Don't you dare drag Boris into this!
Bendy was on his feet in an instant, his hands fisted into Pete's collar. Pete chuckled.
Well. Seems we can add assault to the list.
Bendy glared daggers into Pete's ugly mug.
Now get out. You're fired.
Pete barked into his face. Bendy tightened his fists. For just a second, one little second, Bendy was tempted to cut loose on this slim ball. He would do the world a favor, putting him in his place. Just whip that smug look off his face. A clang outside of the office snapped Bendy out of his rage. He jumped away from Pete. He was shaken by his sudden thirst for violence. He needed to go.
You're a real piece of work, Pete,
Bendy hissed as he opened the door.
Don't let the door hit you on the way out.
Pete lit his cigar and leaned back smiling. Bendy glowered and slammed the door so hard it shook. Bendy didn't buy this bull for a second. Something fishy was going on here.
Bendy, what happened?
Boris came up to Bendy. He already had a smug of dirt on his cheek and a wrench in hand.
Sorry, Boris.
Bendy forced a smile.
I finally lost the job.
What?
Boris dropped his wrench with a clang. Bendy shrugged like it was no big deal.
I'll talk to him. It'll be fine. I can convince him not to.
No, bro.
Bendy cut him off. He waved his hand lazily.
It's fine. I'll figure something out. If you go in there now, you'll just end up losing your job too.
Boris gazed at Bendy crestfallen.
I'm sorry, Bendy. This is all my fault. If I hadn't been so pushy with Wilson, you wouldn't have gotten in trouble.
No, Boris, don't blame yourself.
Something else is up. Bendy said softly, looking suspicious. One of Boris's ears perked. His eyes narrowed.
Something Pete did?
Boris asked in a low voice. Bendy nodded.
I'm not sure.
I'll keep an eye out,
Boris said.
Be careful and don't get into trouble,
Bendy warned. Boris grinned.
I'm always careful,
Boris bragged. Bendy snorted.
I better go before Pete decides to call the cops,
Bendy said. Boris's ears fell.
Okay, I'll see you later.
Later, bro.
Bendy gave a small wave before heading out. With a disgruntled huff, Bendy headed further into town. Since he didn't have work, he might as well go see about this car accident. He planned to stop by the place where gossip flew like wildfire. The wonderful dancing lady. Hopefully, someone there will know something.